Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Hormonally Speaking. It is the final episode of season 4. Yay! And we're ending on a great note with some great guests this week, talking about what I know is one of your favorite topics that we have here on the podcast. We're going to be talking perimenopause. We're going to be talking menopause. We're going to be talking about hormone replacement therapy, all the good stuff that comes with this time of our lives and how to make it better. So my guests today are Maria, an FDN practitioner, and Kristin, a board certified nutritionist. And they are plain spoken friends and practitioners who share a passion for women's health, especially women's health at midlife. As both are themselves menopausal, they've refined the art and science of thriving as a midlife woman based on both clinical and personal experience. They combine individualized nutrition and lifestyle changes tailored to midlife women's needs with mindset coaching, lab testing, and hormone replacement therapy education to help women thrive so that they can stop or prevent their health from spinning out of control. Ooh, I like that. No spinning out of control. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Yeah, so excited that you're here. So, as we talked about a little bit before we got on here, one of the things that I notice in your IG, your Instagram is that, there's all of kind of these new people maybe on the horizon in the menopausal world, right? And some are better than others, right?
We'll dive right in.
We'll dive right in. I know. I was like, we're not even going to talk about your history yet. We'll get into the history later of how you got into this. But I think this is such a fascinating arena because on the one hand, it's so great that this part of life is being talked about really for the first time in a big way, right? But with that can certainly come misinformation. So what are some of the things that you guys see that you feel like are maybe the most the worst things that are being said, and what you would say maybe in place of that?
Gosh, I think I would say some of the worst are the ones who are really attempting, and let's just kind of back up. Menopause is big business right now, right? It's a $600 billion market. We're seeing kind of all these femtech companies jump into the arena with shiny objects. And, Maria's and my biggest thing is that the whole narrative is built around a couple things. One, that menopause is this moment that we all have to reach before we can do anything about it. Mm-hmm. Two, that menopause is all about symptoms. And those two things are what make our heads explode day in and day out, because it kind of is like, tell us that you're really not experienced in menopause without telling us you're really not experienced, because anyone who still wants to keep the eye on those two bogeys is totally out of their lane and not understanding what's really happening. So to that end, you see some of these younger ladies who will be talking about things like seed cycling, or they talk about hormone balancing and things that, if you truly understand the nuances of what's going on during this transition, let alone what has been going on our entire lives with our hormones, you'd throw out the word balance and you would never tell perimenopausal, menopausal woman to eat a bunch of seeds as though that is her solution.
Right.
That, I would say, is kind of where we start. Maria, what do you
what do we see that's wrong? We see like unfortunately, this tends to happen with, say, coaches and not like menopausal physicians. Not that they, in our opinion, necessarily get everything right because they're a physician, but what we've seen with some, say, perimenopause and menopause coaches is they just get completely erroneous, like lab targets wrong. I saw like a perimenopause coach say something like, you really know that you're in the, don't quote me on this, I am paraphrasing at this point because I don't remember, but you really know that, you're in, the transition, or it's time to pay attention when your FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone, is over 40. And we're like, oh, okay, she's reading old research. She's actually reading something called Stages of Reproductive Aging Workshop. That's the name of an article or a study. I'm like, oh, she didn't read something called STRAW. It's called STRAW plus 10. They actually updated that criteria to FSH of over 25. So when we see things like that, we think, okay, you're attempting to start to learn something, but when you put yourself out there with specific data, right? And like, as here, I'm kind of sharing an expert opinion, and that's wrong. Kristin and I tend to cringe a little and really want to, correct them.
Yeah.
It's noisy. And I think, not every woman's perimenopausal and menopause experience is going to be the same. So the fact that everyone keeps trying to like lay out these little checklists or, questions and answers, if this, then that. Well, fun fact, you can be low in one hormone and feel low and show up as low in another on these questionnaires, right? So they're not accurate, to be honest. And then they also talk about HRT as though it's this one thing, that HRT just is this thing that exists. And HRT, as I know from your past podcast, I mean, takes a complete spectrum of regimens, forms, dosing approaches, etc. And, acting as though HRT is like a bottle of Advil that you pull off the shelf and everyone takes is just so disingenuous to women, because it's making the whole waters muddy. Women start comparing, oh gosh, I'm not having hot flashes, I must not be in perimenopause, or I must not be having a bad menopause, right? And that's, again, completely erroneous. Maria and I didn't have hot flashes either. But so these sorts of things are what drive us nuts within this space. And then we kind of couple that with this push within the medical community to adhere to a particular licensing board or credentialing board's narrative. And, we get it. These licensed prescribers are very much beholden to those who are going to report them to insurance companies or, kind of hold this standard over their head. And the sad fact is the standard of care in the United States is actually to give birth control to a woman up to the age of 55.
I know. I see it all the time with my clients.
Yeah. And these coaches will literally equate synthetic hormones as HRT still. So it's just, that's the issue. And that's what we're kind of setting out to be, cutting through the noise. We do it, I would say, in a fairly direct sort of way, which,
snarky sometimes.
Either love us or hate us. We don't really care. Yeah. It's more, we just think, women have been either gaslit or over treated for the wrong thing for so long that we're just trying to be like, look, there is some clarity here. It's going to take unlearning a lot of what you've been told. And, we'd love to help, kind of thing. So we just try and educate.
Absolutely. And what you just mentioned, even about the hot flashes, I was just reading, I don't know if it's out yet, but there's a new medication that's coming out specifically for hot flashes, right? And I was like, oh my God.
Anyone who watched the Super Bowl news knows it, right? My husband's looking at me, he's like, why am I watching the most guy thing in the world right now with an ad for hot flashes? And
I was like, I didn't watch the Super Bowl, so I missed that.
Yeah.
But, it's, I mean, that's case in point of like, the drug companies hopping on this bandwagon and being like, oh, we have something for that, right? Rather than going to the source of what is happening for women. Yeah, absolutely. So how did you both get into this work? I'm assuming because of some personal experiences.
Yeah, our own experiences. I was about 43 when perimenopause started, and it was like loss of sleep and mood issues and just things like that. And I kind of just knew that I wanted to address these things with like from a functional health perspective, with like an integrative doctor. Boy, that have I come to realize now over the last 12 years that I guess like any other profession, there's really great functional doctors and there's really not so good ones. Yeah. So I did go to a doctor in New York City. He was an MD. He had kind of a holistic health center. Funny thing is, I just remember walking, it was like the day after Christmas or something like that. I was really pretty desperate. And the first thing I walk into an integrative holistic health center is, do you want a flu shot? Like literally got signed in. I was like, oh, I wonder if this is sort of like a red flag as to the experience. It wasn't an all out horrible experience. It just was very like learning through a fire hose, put me on HRT again at 43, little on the young side, maybe, maybe not. it's not so much an age thing. It's the symptoms and hormones thing. I think I don't necessarily think I needed it, but even if I did need it at that point, I'd have to go back and check my labs. I wasn't educated at all. It was like, take this, this, and this. And by the way, one of those thises was actually benzodiazepine for sleep.
Oh yeah.
So maybe that kind of offering of the flu shot when I walked through the door was something I should have paid attention to. Anyway, was like, I need to figure this out. I knew that there had to be a better way. And that's when I kind of started the kind of extra education journey and mentorship and things like that.
Yeah, the journey. It certainly is one. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
How
mine
about you,
was,
Kristin?
my mom had full hysterectomy, ovaries, everything removed at 32 at my birth, to be perfectly honest. So
Wow.
having some sort of paradigm for what menopause or perimenopause was totally not in my world. I had no genetic, kind of story to look back on. And I was too young to remember kind of what she experienced with no hormones in the tank. So when it came to me, I mean, after the birth of my last kid, definitely was, where most of us are essentially menopausal in terms of the postnatal environment of our hormones, right? And I was a complete train wreck and probably should have seen the writing on the wall in terms of what was to come. But it was the moods, it was the energy, it was like ragey stuff. I mean, I was a kind of hide the knives every Saturday was sort of my husband's joke, and he'd take the kids out of the house like, mommy's having her moment. And I was aware of it, but I couldn't quite figure it out. But I ended up being offered antidepressants and then said no to that and had a wonderful nurse practitioner come to me quietly outside of the purview of my gynecologist and say, do the Mirena, do this IUD, it's going to be great for you, etc. So I was only in my early 30s when I did that. And fast forward, it was probably a decade into my Mirena journey. And it's not going to mask everything. I was still going through perimenopause and low hormones in my early 40s, like Maria. But I was living in Boston, very big pharma, conventional medicine focus, good luck finding a real functional provider there.
Right.
And I went to who, my GP was this woman from India, and she definitely had more of a holistic approach. And I thought, oh, she's going to get it. And I went to her and she looked at me and she said, you are too young. There is nothing wrong with you. And I just kept begging. I said, just test my hormones. Like, I'm just curious. Would you test them? Cadillac insurance. It's not going to cost you anything. Not going to cost me. Let's just no, refuse. So then I went back and I said, I think I have Lyme disease. Like, I was so convinced that something was wrong with me. And I'm doing all this like self-research and then going back and forth. And she's totally gaslighting me. Nothing is wrong. Now, fast forward, I was deeply perimenopausal. By the time I had my Mirena removed a couple years later, I was fully menopausal. So everything that I was going through, from the skin changes, the hair changes, granted, we're talking symptoms, but that's what gets our attention, right? Sure.
Yeah.
I had no idea what was going on with my lipids, my thyroid, my bone density, all these other things. And so by the time, I started out of frustration, like Maria, just the self-education, going back to school, then getting mentorship, etc. Finally had one of Maria's and my mentors look at me at a conference and say, you need to take that Mirena out. You need to deal with your reality. And it was a huge wake up call. And that was where the two of us were kind of like, okay, we are like bookends of the spectrum. She got overserved. I got underserved. Right? And every woman falls somewhere in between. It's not acceptable. And so that was just kind of what started us.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how long have you guys been working together now?
We're going on 5 years.
Yeah.
Nice. That's amazing. So speaking of testing, I know there's a huge debate in terms of whether it's worth testing in perimenopause or not. So what are your takes on it?
Yeah, we think it's worthwhile. In fact, if we could kind of wind back the clock, say 10 years, we would have tested with blood testing, estradiol on day 12, progesterone on day 21, and FSH
day 5, day 21,
once or twice a year, right? Starting at, I don't know, age 40, we'll say that. So and that would have shown a baseline of sorts and would have shown like trends through the years. So, if anyone out there is listening and wants to do that, that's fabulous. You will be like laying a lot of foundational like data and knowledge for like your say mid to late 40s, right? I think the question, we'll just kind of come right out and address it, is like, well, is the Dutch test a waste of money? Well, here, we'll give you our take on the Dutch test. We don't love it for hormone volume, right? Like, well, here's your estrogen level, here's your progesterone level, here's your testosterone level. What we like to see is like, how do hormones process in the body?
Absolutely.
What's your B6 and B12 like? Because those are super important vitamins for women to have appropriate optimal amounts, you know, on HRT and off HRT. Like those are really important. You know, our adrenal health plays into our overall health, our bone health, our metabolism, things like that, you know, bone health. So, you know, there's so much on it to have sort of like a, I want to stand out, so I'm going to tell women that they don't need to do the Dutch test. I mean, and that's coming from both kind of health coach kind of people and from physicians as well. It just shows like a lack of kind of understanding of the nuances of the test.
Yeah. And I think, you know, from the blood testing perspective, the argument frequently is your hormones are up and down and all over the place during perimenopause. So why bother testing?
Right. Right.
Unfortunately, that has turned into a position statement by many medical societies that all you got to do is talk to the woman. She knows. And the reality is, guess what? Most women, we are kind of like doers. We're caretakers. We push ourselves. We go, which means we normalize things. And so Maria and I just met with someone this morning. We always start with a questionnaire. It's 316 questions. They've got to go through and answer all these sorts of things. It's really just to give a symptom burden sort of picture. It's nothing clinical. It's just what they report. Now, if you looked at it, all of the things related to her gut were like, not a big deal. And yet we do a GI map test on her and we see she has blastoparasite, she has giardia, she's wildly dysbiotic, she's got massive colon inflammation. And so again, if we had asked her, how's your gut? She would have been, it's good. And it's not. So when it comes to hormones, to ask, hey, Kristin, how are you feeling? And you're like, I'm good, because you know what? You talk to your neighbors and they say, yeah, I don't sleep either. Yeah, sex isn't as fun anymore. Maybe it's just being married this long. You know, we always have an excuse and an explanation for the symptoms because we don't want to be a burden on anyone. We don't have a lot of time for this crap, right? We've got things to do. We've got businesses to run and, you know, maybe kids to care for and partners to support and everything else. Sorry, asking a woman what her symptoms are and then telling us that taking blood labs is not accurate. You've got to be joking. And you know, our attitude is, particularly with the Dutch, I don't care if you're low hormones or robust hormones, the Dutch is still going to tell you whatever it tells you about your hormone metabolism. That's not changing month to month. Right.
Absolutely. Yep.
So there is definitely value in that. As for the blood labs, like Maria said, nobody should look at any lab. I don't care if I went and tested your iron status or your thyroid. It's just a snapshot in time. Right. Nobody's arguing that this is like
all the rest of them.
Map. But it is relevant. And particularly since we know, like Maria started out with this one marker FSH, sorry, ladies, once it goes past a certain level, it's not going back. So that is a sign. I don't care if your progesterone and estrogen are up and down during the perimenopausal journey. So there's very much value. We like to joke that people are down on what they're not up on. So when you have these providers who are like, you don't need to test, just talk to the lady. We're like, it's because they A, don't understand the testing, B, 100%. Don't want to get into the physiology of what's going on. And, you know, those who want to, you know, kind of crap on the Dutch, it's usually because they don't understand it. So
yeah, absolutely. So, so you guys use the Dutch. What do you think about saliva testing? What do you think about just regular urine testing? Do you have thoughts on those?
Saliva testing is really good for the 4-point cortisol diurnal pattern. Okay, that's it can be used for that. But even that, you know, we're just seeing that's also just a small portion of like the adrenal picture. We're missing like total cortisol production for the day. So yeah. We don't like saliva testing for like determining hormone status, and saliva can't tell you hormone metabolism either. So not fans.
And then blood spot testing is another common one. And I think what a lot of people don't understand is that when they have these HRT providers or OBGYNs, many times their credentialing boards are being funded by the labs that actually produce these tests. So when they're huge fans of something like ZRT blood spot testing, it's usually because they're being told at their last medical conference, support these guys. They're never told they're writing, checks to underwrite your education. So the problem with blood spot is it's capillary. It's capillary blood. It is very different than venous serum blood. The other problem is that most people, when they do it, they're kind of milking the finger a little bit. When we milk the finger or whatever it is to get this blood, we mix interstitial fluid and we dilute the ultimate specimen. And Maria and I were so kind of adamant to the lack of credibility of some of these tests that I served as the guinea pig. And 1 month I went into LabCorp in the morning and did my blood draw. In my car, I did the blood spot testing. I wasn't even separated by an hour. I did the urine samples before I left. And then I did a saliva test when I got home and literally did the whole gamut. And then, looked at the results.
I bet that was exciting when you got all those results back.
It was unbelievable to see the differences. And had my treatment been determined based off saliva or blood spot testing, I would have been wildly mismanaged when it comes to things. So that's our concern with that is that, convenience, price, etc. I mean, for the vast majority of people, ordering blood labs from LabCorp Request is not that expensive. And if your doctor is ordering it and sending you a bill for $1,000, you're being absolutely milked. So
100%. I know it's crazy when when it doesn't go through insurance and it's like, you can order that on your own, several different places for so much cheaper. Yeah.
Well, and I think, my insurance, for example, is a deductible. So even when they run it through my insurance, if it's January through April, May, before we've used up our deductible, I'll get a bill for $1,000 for something that when I price it out myself at LabCorp was $96.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I tell clients that all the time. I'm able to order labs through where I did my training and do like a comprehensive, lab that covers all the CBC and thyroid and all of those things. And literally when I say, you can see what your insurance covers, and they'll come back and they'll be like, this is like $1,500, and I'm like, yeah, we can get it for you for $200,
Correct. Yeah.
And so I know it's crazy to me. I think that's like a racket, but that's a whole other thing that we can talk about. So in terms of the serum testing, I know a lot of the telehealth places that are, focusing on HRT, that's kind of what they use is serum testing. What are your...
I don't think they use anything, actually.
Oh, well, okay. A couple of the ones that I know do.
Okay.
They're giving lab orders to their people. Okay.
Yeah. So like Defy Medical is one that a lot of women utilize.
Right. Just to say, there are some who just go on symptoms and a questionnaire.
Yeah. And I certainly have heard that too. But I'm just curious, in that situation, how I know that there's a lot of debate on, especially if you are already on HRT, how fast it processes through your system. Is that going to show up on the blood labs? What are your thoughts on really utilizing, I guess, maybe more when you're on HRT as compared to, if you're just kind of testing your natural hormone production? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, there is some debate as to whether or not transdermal progesterone is going to show up in blood labs. So that tends to be one where there's a bit of an artifact where maybe, this is where honestly it comes into having a very skilled and experienced HRT provider, because they're able, based on decades of clinical experience, to have essentially come up with a construct that says, a blood serum volume of X of progesterone when a woman is on transdermal is that provider's target. Okay. And, let's face it, even lab values themselves are artifacts of unhealthy populations and averages and, 2 standard deviations and all this kind of stuff, which a lot of people don't realize. So, but, estradiol definitely, it's, we see a lot of these telemedicine places directing women to apply a suboptimal form of estrogen. Usually it's Biest, which is a combination of estriol, which ladies, we only make estriol in robust amounts when we're pregnant. And last I checked at 53, I'm not pregnant. So I don't want estriol, but they're telling them to apply it only once a day. And these transdermal creams are frequently only a half-life just from the pharmacokinetics of 12 hours.
Right.
So you have a woman apply her cream, let's say at 7:30 at night. We just had a client who did this. And then she took her blood labs at 10 in the morning.
And it's like bottomed out. Yeah. Absolutely.
So, there's problems with what they're prescribing in terms of the product itself. There's problems in the direction of how often they're telling women to take their HRT.
Yeah.
So therefore their testing is usually invalid at worst and, unreliable at best, because it's very much dependent upon those other things.
Absolutely. Well, I know, with oral progesterone, most women take it at night because it helps them to sleep. So again, if they're taking their blood test in the morning, it's not going to show necessarily a true value, right?
Well, it does have a bit of a longer peak time.
Okay.
So you're going to get, if you take it first thing in the morning, your blood labs, and you took it right before bed, you are getting a pretty valid picture.
Okay.
But the problem is so many women are being dosed the same hormone every single day, and estradiol and progesterone together, which in and of itself is problematic, because newsflash, that's not how we made hormones to begin with. So if we're replacing them, you'd think we'd want to mimic what the body did. And so if you've got estrogen, which is the gas pedal, and progesterone, which is the brake, and you're giving them both at the same time, do you ever really get an accurate picture of what your estradiol is?
Right. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit more about that, when sort of the best times of utilizing the different hormones?
Well, we'll kind of keep it pretty simple, because it gets very very complex. Okay, let's kind of isolate out progesterone. Okay. A lot of doctors have already decided for women that they should take progesterone every day, and that's static. It's the same amount every day. We believe that the best should be cyclic. Okay, that mimics a menstrual cycle. We only made progesterone from approximately days 14 through 28. Okay, so we tend to do best when we mimic nature. Now, look, for any woman that's listening, you're happy, you're taking progesterone every day, like it's working for you. You don't have, bloat or morning fatigue or,
sleeping
weakness or, more power to you. I mean, progesterone every day is a thing. There are a lot of women doing it.
Yeah.
And like I said, if it's good for you, fine. There is some data showing that it's not as good for brain health.
Interesting. Yeah.
Nor is it good for cancer protection. And that's the other thing is, when women, Maria was, kind of, I would say, mimicking the responses we hear from women, especially through these DMs on social media, like, it works for me. We're like, that's great, but what does that mean? Right? Is it mean because it's alleviating your symptoms? Because again, if we go back to the beginning of this conversation and say that what's happening as our ovaries reach their senescent stage and we lose our hormones, we're also losing all of these other biological actions, genomic sequences that were occurring in the body, one of which is cancer protection. And of course, that's like, newsflash for women, because they're always thinking that hormones cause cancer, right? And why we're not all dropping dead of cancer during pregnancy.
Right, like when we're 25, when our estrogen is super high.
Yeah. But so what, we like to kind of teach women is, let's go back to what our hormones were doing before we ever reached this stage of perimenopause, right? And look at this kind of beautiful dance that the two of them had, slightly in opposition to each other, one kind of rising to its crescendo and then falling, and the other one doing the same. That wasn't just to bring on a bleed. We're taught that it's about menses, and we're taught that it's about, stimulating the follicles to release an egg and make you fertile. Well, newsflash, as much as that's our, biological imperative is to give birth to children, there's also other things that are happening because of those peaks. And those have to do with bone remodeling, and they have to do with your heart muscle, and they have to do with brain sustainability and cognition, and they have to do with a P53 tumor suppressor. We need estradiol's peak to kind of prime that, and progesterone's peak to set it off. So if women were able to understand really what their cycling hormones were doing, I think they'd be in a better position to actually hear what the HRT being offered to them is or is not doing. And that's our biggest thing, right?
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I mean, I certainly have heard, you know, following the cycle approach to HRT, but then so many people, it's very static. It's very much like
Yeah,
you just take
most
all
women use static. Yep.
yeah. And when you think about, like you're saying, all of the sort of big things that we're thinking long term for women, bone health, brain health, heart health, right? And the protections that we get from the hormones, staying within that cycle that we've had for 30 plus years is the smarter approach or more beneficial approach. Yeah. So does that mean that estradiol, you guys recommend sort of a creep up then that first half or part?
I mean, we teach about that, right? We do
Yeah.
teach about it.
Okay.
Because there is a peak of estradiol in the cycle. It's around day 12.
Yeah.
We make women understand like what this entails and, you know, just what's required of them.
Yeah.
We don't force our views on anyone, but most women, when they realize that this sounds like this makes sense to them, they want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we see too often women feel like they got this initial kind of feeling of a jet fuel insertion, right? When they started their HRT, like, oh my God, my fatigue resolved, my joints don't hurt as much, I'm sleeping better, I actually am willing to have sex. Then when they think about kind of where they could be, there's a disconnect, right? There isn't this vibrancy that's happening for women on static HRT. Now, again, as Maria just said, we don't care what you choose. If you just want to slap a low dose patch on and take progesterone every single night because, hey, you want that sleep come hell or high water, go for it. Just know, we just want that choice to be an informed one, right? We just want it to be like, okay, understand that you're addressing the imperatives that are kind of at the top of your list right now. What we don't want women to think is that by 65, 70, that they're going to be covered in terms of the bone remodeling or these other things that are changing as we age. And I was listening to a guest you had on in the last couple months, who I love the way they put it, was essentially, you know, are we losing our hormones because we're aging, or are we aging because we're losing our hormones? Right. And we would take that second response as what's really happening is that we've got this accelerated aging because of the loss of our hormones. What if we could kind of pump the brakes on that aging piece? And the sad thing is women aren't being told. So they're given these off the shelf options or kind of suboptimal options that just address the like screaming symptoms right now. And then we meet them at like 60, 63, 65, and it's
not
heart-wrenching, Kristin. It is gut punch heart-wrenching when these women are like, I didn't know, you know?
So sad. Yeah.
It's so sad. And now, you know, we can maybe halt some osteoporosis. Can't always reverse it. You know, hormones are best when we sustain brain health, but if we've now got a bunch of tau proteins built up in the brain, you know, cognition may kind of be where it's at for a while. No woman deserves to have that be her wake-up call on her 65th birthday. So our attitude is talk about it now. Talk about it in the 40s, right? And if there's a woman listening who is 65 and is like, I feel cheated and screwed, we're like, A, you should be mad. Absolutely. And we're here for that. But B, all is not lost. You still have an opportunity to preserve what you have right now. It's just going to take a little bit more attention and oversight, and going to your gynecologist, who you may love because they delivered all your babies or something, probably not the best option.
They're not going to do it. I saw this woman recently who she started, I think it was just progesterone, but she was literally 76. And she was like, they will pry it from my cold dead hands, you know? And of course, majority of doctors would be like, you're going to kill yourself starting on hormones at that age, you know? And so I think it's so important. And I'm glad that you brought that up. Like, even if you're in your 60s, even if you're, you know, 10 years post menopause, like, it's okay. Like, you still can do this. Yeah.
Well, you probably can, but like, if you are really poor metabolic health like that,
Mm,
you have to proceed with caution. But
right.
anyway, let's talk about that 76-year-old that started progesterone for a bit.
Yeah.
Progesterone only HRT. It's
Yeah.
where a lot of women start.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It works in perimenopause.
Mm-hmm.
It may even, when I'm never going to argue against someone's lived experience. That's
Right.
great. I'd love to speak to that 76-year-old in 3 years or
Right.
maybe even a year. Is that progesterone still working for her?
Right.
The reason, Christine, is progesterone works best when it has a receptor. It actually really only works when it has a progesterone receptor.
Yeah.
What makes that progesterone receptor is reaching a concentration of estradiol in the blood. Okay. Estradiol creates a progesterone receptor. So therefore, if you put progesterone into a body with low to no estradiol, it's probably not going to work, or it's going to work initially, but then it's going to completely stop.
Yep. Yep.
So
Yep. Totally agree.
I just want the people out there to know that, not against, progesterone only HRT tends to work for kind of early stage perimenopause women.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. And I think that leads into my next question really well. I know there's a big debate on when you should bring estradiol in. Some people say you have to wait till menopause to bring estradiol in, or biased, as you guys mentioned earlier, is often used. Other people say, hey, maybe we should be bringing in estradiol even earlier because of this sort of like up down that's happening, particularly sort of that mid to late perimenopause time. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the reluctance in considering estradiol when a woman is perimenopausal, because technically she's still got some endogenous production happening, right? And so there's this theory, which is based on negative feedback loops, that we're going to put something into the system out from the outside, and we're going to essentially short circuit and kind of disrupt that signaling or endogenous production. And it hasn't exactly been shown to be true. It is with certain things, but even we used to be told that with melatonin, right? Oh, don't take it, you'll never produce it on your own.
Stop producing it, yeah.
Not true. I mean, there's a certain amount where obviously too much is never a good thing of anything, right? But there's this theory of, can we augment this declining endogenous production? And I think, people get hung up on the words. They don't like augment. And so their answer is, no, you can't do that. But the reality is if you were to look at a graph, right, you have this constant decline of progesterone. You have a decline of estrogen with all these like erratic blips. If we were to give women in perimenopause estradiol, it preserves those receptors that Maria just talked about, so that progesterone experience will continue to be beneficial. But B, it takes those kind of big amplitude ups and downs of estradiol production on its decline and makes them less sharp. And that is the biggest benefit to women, because, it does impact our moods. It does create sometimes very heavy periods for women. It creates the hot flashes. And what we know now is the hot flashes are damaging to our vasculature, right? They're more than just waking us up and maybe making us feel like, God, did I just pee the bed? What just happened? Sort of a thing. It's really about maintaining homeostasis, right? So we hate the word balance when it comes to balancing hormones, but homeostasis in terms of everything working correctly as the body
right time. Yeah.
We can do that by augmenting or adding or layering in whatever. And that just means usually that a woman in perimenopause is going to be slow walked into HRT. Might be some low dose to sort of, add on to what she's got. And then a good provider, again, HRT is not a set it and forget it thing. You're still going to have this shift occurring with your ovaries. That dosing, that approach is going to need to be adjusted. So I think that's the other problem, is these telemedicine places, they don't have a patient relationship with you, really, right? They're not asking you like, hey, Christine, how's your sex life been? How's sleep been? Have you gained any weight? How's your hair? Blah, 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 blah. What's going on? And so they're not really checking back in with you. I mean, the onus is now on you to go refill my prescription. Okay, but is anyone saying like, well, it's been 2 years now, Christine, you probably need a little bit more estradiol. Maybe let's get a DEXA scan and check things out, right? No, these people aren't doing this. And this is where Maria and I are like, A, the informed consent, be knowledgeable before you choose something, but B, understand what this practitioner is capable of delivering to you. And if it is just a prescription, run.
Yeah.
run far and fast.
Yeah.
That is not what women need. We need, kind of a managed care situation. It's a very changing dynamic environment. You better have a practitioner who's just as dynamic in their ability to pivot and work with you.
Absolutely. Do you guys have a list of practitioners that you work with or like that you
We do.
refer? Yeah,
we do.
good.
So the even before we get to that though, for women, it's like we tell women this all the time, and it's not us being cheeky as if to say like we're the only ones who have this information. Like women can go out and get the same education we had, read books, go to physician level courses, programs, courses, seminars, have a mentor. But here's the thing is like we talk a good deal about HRT on our social media. We try to like bring in other topics as well, but HRT is kind of at the forefront. But one of the things we say is we really want you to know, to understand what are your options from A to Z, right? And because when they don't know what those options are, I am going to throw a dart and I'm going to guarantee you that that dart is going to land on pellet.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about set it and forget it.
Oh my God. And like places popping up all over,
Oh,
right?
Like estheticians and dermatologists. I'm like, what is happening? Yeah. That, and I would say to Maria, I thought this is where you were going with that comment was that we think HRT is magical, but it's not a magic pill.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, a woman needs to take some accountability for her health and aging. And that's going to be proper nutrition. Not going to be a vegan template. I hate to tell you, ladies. It's going to have to be some weight training. Pilates ain't going to cut it. Pilates is wonderful. Running is wonderful if your knees aren't like mine and you can keep running, great. But
and your cortisol is not bottomed out.
Exactly. And you're not doing it on a cup of coffee, 6 hours of sleep after having put the kids on the bus, and now you have no food in your system, but you're going to go run 6 miles. So there's, nutrition, movement, stress mitigation. I mean, Maria, we started talking about that with the Dutch. Stress affects everything. The body's kind of imperative is to keep you alive. And if it thinks it's under threat, guess what? All these other necessary things get put on a shelf in the background. So your metabolism's going to slow, your, thyroid's going to slow, all these things. So women have to be an active participant in this entire hormonal game. Thinking that they can kind of take the habits of their 30s and early 40s, throw some HRT on their skin and call it a day is incredibly naive. And it's honestly kind of like willfully negligent, right? None of us should be aging as though it's not our job. It's just happening to us and we'll just take something for it. Not a good thing.
It's hard, right? Because we live in a culture and it's always been sort of put upon us, take this pill when you're, having this issue, which even in those instances never really works either, but people are so used to it. So to get them out of that mindset, I could ask you a million more things about HRT, but I want to pivot into sort of what you're talking about because, I think the protein thing is being talked about a lot these days. A lot of women are like, I can't eat the amount of protein, or they just can't even visualize, if you're saying 100, 125 grams a day, that kind of thing. So let's talk about sort of the importance of that. And then I would love for you guys to throw out like what some of your meals are in a day.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, women, we have something called anabolic resistance as we age, which means that our ability to benefit from protein becomes less efficient. And so we're going to need more than we had been doing, using before. The problem is that what is a protein has become completely conflated in the world. And we have kind of overcorrections on both ends. We have women, like we just met with someone today where she's hitting her protein macros every day, but she's doing it with ground chicken and ground turkey exclusively. You tell me how she feels.
Right.
Freaking miserable, right? She has no fat in her diet. She's under eating. She can't lose weight. And she's like, but I'm hitting my protein. Okay. We've kind of missed the message if that's the only thing. Then we have those who are like going to open a big can of beans, dump it on some rice and be like, look at me. I got all this protein. We're like, okay, there's issues with bioavailability, how much of that is giving you a full amino acid profile. And by the way, there's a lot of carbs in that meal.
Exactly.
Beans on your rice. So, we've got to kind of get women to understand that it's not about being masculine or eating only red
Right.
meat and being carnivore or just hitting a protein number. It's about understanding what is a protein, what isn't a protein in terms of what it's doing for you in the body. You hinted about collagen. Collagen is a wonderful supplement. We both use it for different things. It is not a food protein. Okay. It has amino acids that make up proteins, but it is not a complete protein. And when we talk about why it's so important, it's about getting into this chain called muscle protein synthesis, right? Women need to understand the role of muscle as we age. We think of it as biomechanical in terms of locomotion. You know, can I get off the toilet without holding onto the counter, or, you know, chase after my dog or whatever? But it's also doing so much else for us, right? It's our sink for glucose metabolism. It releases anti-inflammatory proteins that control inflammation in the body. It's super important for our immune system regulation. So there's all these kind of biochemical things that we need protein or muscle for. Well, how do we get muscle, or how do we hold on to it? We have to eat complete amino acids, and we have to stress our muscles. So that means we have to eat animal protein, and we have to work out and lift heavy things and not do, you know, some Jane Fonda workout. So, you know, getting it, we get it. It sounds intimidating. And I think part of that is all this Instagram messaging is like, look at me, I'm having a ribeye for breakfast.
Right.
Okay. Some of us have done that already, been there, done that. It can work as an elimination diet. It can be incredibly healing for gut health and all these other things. Long-term sustainability, Maria and I are going to go, nah, not so much.
I agree with you 100%.
For breakfast, but not every day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're like, every once in a while, okay, I have some left over. That's great. Yeah.
But the other thing is, women think breakfast have to look like breakfast. And, you know, so that's these smoothie bowls. Like, thank God Instagram's done with showing us everyone's like smoothie bowl, right? I think we've kind of finally moved past that. Their smoothie bowls are branded to their colors and all, whatever. But, you know, and smoothies can be great provided we're conscious and intentional about what we put in them. Right. So Maria and I like to say there's hacks and there's tricks, like throw some shrimp on your plate. Do you understand what protein bombs shrimp are, or scallops, things like that? You know, 2 eggs and a couple slices of bacon is not even going to get you to this threshold to kick off muscle protein synthesis. So trying to get women to understand sort of how can you hack your protein goals in a template that fits with food that you love, that you're not going to tire of, and, you know, isn't forced into kind of this particular color scheme or, you know, plate curated for Instagram. So Emily, think today, Maria, I had 3 chicken sausage, some Greek yogurt, a scoop of whey protein, and a meat stick. That was my breakfast. That was post workout. Maria and I had a client early this morning. Maria, what was yours?
For breakfast, I had a protein smoothie with whey in it. Whey is an excellent source of amino acids, and I will just say that, and I had peanut butter in it because whey doesn't have a lot of fat, and we need fat with our protein. So that's super important.
But when you say smoothie, Maria, I think of, and you think of,
like something too fruity,
fruit, this sort of thing. Yeah.
No, I had some berries in it because berries are like super high phytonutrient but low carb, and you know, they're just delicious. I think a little bit of maybe extra fiber, and it was super filling. You know, lasted me 4 or 5 hours between, you know, breakfast and lunch. And then for lunch, I had a salad with a lot of arugula and some carrot shreds, and I had 1 huge organic strawberry that I chopped up, and some pecans and some goat cheese. I haven't had this in a long time. So many of us are just stuck on like chicken because it's like high protein, it's low fat, you know. But so I had the pecans and the goat cheese in there, so it was lovely. You know, I think it was 6.3 ounces, so well over 40 grams.
Most women would protein. They put like a piece this big of salmon or chicken on it, right? If you weigh it, it's like 3 ounces.
Right.
Yeah, so it's like usually 20 grams if they're lucky.
Yeah.
It's not enough.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you noted about you felt full for 4 or 5 hours after you had the smoothie, you know, is a really important point, because if you're drinking a smoothie and you're hungry an hour and a half later, then there's not enough protein and fat in there, right?
It's probably fat that's missing.
Yeah.
But also let's go back to like salad and vegetables. One of the things we hear a lot of is, you know, that I can't fit that amount of protein. And I have actually, I kind of almost made it a point. I was like, I'm going to have some salads this week because I've really scaled back on my vegetables. And I do like vegetables and I like fiber. But Kristen and I, we don't chase fiber.
Okay. Yeah. I was curious about that.
We probably get on most days 25, maybe it's a lot more today because I had like 4 cups of arugula. We probably get 25 to 35 grams of fiber, which is generally, you know, that's a good amount.
More than the
but
average
we don't
American.
chase it. So if I don't like hit my fiber,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
If I don't hit my fiber grams in a day, I'm not like concerned. And here's the thing, and because I can always like for the microbiome benefits, I can have a freaking like tablespoon of sauerkraut. I'm good, right? I don't necessarily need volume, right? And so here's the thing, like women who are like, oh, I can't eat that much protein. You literally may just have to like shrink down your volume of vegetables. You can still have some. We're not like, again, we're not saying you have to be all this or all that. We're just saying like, let's understand the priority here. Get the protein in. And if you can fit some vegetables in, fine. But if you're having, like I had today, I mean, it's funny thing is I could still eat because I don't know, it wasn't super filling.
Chicken, Maria.
I know. I just like to break it up every once in a while. It can't always be salmon and beef.
Yeah.
But funny thing is, you do sometimes like, you know, we get this like message like plant-based. So we're like, we just got this massive salad and we feel virtuous and we don't get enough protein in. So
and we wonder why we're hungry. Yeah. And I mean, even Mark Sisson, God bless him, you know, he pioneered the big ass salad.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he'd have maybe a little protein with it.
He doesn't do that anymore.
No, he flat came out and said like, I was wrong. Yep. Yeah. He was like, it should be a side salad, and newsflash, ladies, eat it at the end of your meal because women don't understand. Many women have little impaired gut health. We could get into how estradiol affects the microbiome and peristalsis in the bowels and all these things. But so things get slowed. When you start with a salad, you're right. You don't feel like eating a lot of protein because you don't have a lot of room for it. You're distended and you're bloated and your body is like, oh my God, I got to take all this insoluble fiber and try and break it down.
Right.
Stick protein in there. Right.
Yeah.
So we're like, eat your protein. And then if you're still hungry, enjoy whatever vegetables and fiber and things that you want. You know, there's other ways to do it, whether it's a little resistant starch in your whey powder with your morning workout shake or whatever. But yeah, we're, you know, kind of like, you have to be intentional, and we get it. There's been a lot of blowback against weighing and tracking, and we've seen it. We've seen the disordered eating that's come out of that, this obsessive kind of orthorexia stuff. Yeah. That's, you know, we have to kind of get correct back to the middle. We can't be anti-diet and we can't be rigid, right? Because that's no way to live.
100%. Yeah.
So let's fall back in the middle and be like, okay, track every few days, like, or 2 days a week, just kind of like as a check-in with yourself. Am I hitting these things? Do I know what protein looks like? I mean, cottage cheese, phenomenal protein bomb, you know? Little things that you can do to kind of amp up your protein. But again, you have to have skin in the game, which means you're gonna have to pay attention, which means you're gonna have to probably track and count a little bit. And sometimes we describe it as, it's like going back to kindergarten, just learn your letters, right? Learn your macros, you know, understand what does it look like, and journal. How did I feel? Was I like one?
That's the most important
thing. At 3 in the afternoon. There's my sign that breakfast and lunch didn't cut it, right? So it's just teaching and learning. And I think part of it is there's a lot of inertia at this stage in life. You know, we're taking care of everyone else, like, oh, having to add one more thing to our list of to-dos. It sucks. Exactly. But we try and say, think of it more like, I get to work out. I get to choose what I eat to nourish my body. I get to determine my afternoon energy. Whole different mindset. And, you know, women tend to buy in a little bit better when they realize how blessed they are that these are options that they have to choose from.
Absolutely. I mean, even for myself, you know, I almost died after a fibroid surgery that went wrong, right? And I ended up having an ostomy bag for 6 months, lost half my colon, etc. But, you know, sometimes when I get that mood of like, why don't I have to go work out? Why do I have to go do these things? You know, I just think, oh my God, during that time, I couldn't do any of these things. I couldn't eat the foods that I wanted to. I couldn't go move my body. Like, how amazing is it that I have the option and the choice to be able to go do this? And it completely flips the mindset, right? So I love that so much of these things, even when we're talking about disordered eating past, because I work with women and the majority of women have some level of a disordered eating past, right? A lot of it has to be that mindset shift, of like, okay, it's not about the weight loss. Like, it's about how I feel, so I'm so glad that you guys brought up that point, because I think that that's really something that women need to hear again and again.
And again and again. Yeah. And the other thing that we would say is something has to change to create, right? And so a lot of women come into this thinking like, oh, but I don't, why do I have to do this? Or I know I should, but it's almost like they don't want to because they know that they should.
Yes, absolutely. It's that like, it's this like inner thing, right? That works against us. It's like, I don't want to, like, yeah.
Don't tell me what I have to do, even though you're the one telling yourself that, right? It's crazy ambivalence. But, then it's kind of like, okay, well, you can wait until you're rock bottom, whatever that may be, right? Or you can say, screw it, this is my life to choose and do what I want. And that mindset piece is a huge element, we think, in midlife in particular, because when progesterone's declining, we're losing a lot of our neurotransmitters getting into the brain. And without these wonderful metabolites that come from our, metabolism of hormones, we don't get GABA and dopamine and serotonin and all these things appropriately in there. So there does come kind of almost this inflection point where it's like some women are going to need a little hormone support in order to find the gumption to make the change. Right?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Well, I could go on forever with you guys. Like, there's probably 20 questions in my brain from everything that we've talked about, but we'll have to wrap this up. Thank you so much for all of this incredible information. Let people know how they can get in touch with you.
So they can follow us on Instagram. We, just kind of type in Wise and Well in the search bar, and our picture, both of us will come up, and just kind of follow us. We try to be education forward. Not a ton of selfies.
I'm pretty anti-social media, I'll be honest. And it's
I'm the same.
Yeah, she's the brave one of the pair of us who's putting herself.
I don't find most of the times I enjoy it. And then our website, same name, wiseandwell.me. But if they actually go, I guess they can also Google Wise and Well Mighty Networks if they're not on Instagram, right? You can Google Wise and Well Mighty Networks, and we have like a free Mighty Networks channel. It's where we have this compendium of really deep dive articles, things that read like this. If menopause is natural, why should I even consider hormone replacement therapy? We also have a 7-part, Kristin, article on cholesterol, such an area, a topic of confusion for women. Like, we go really deep. And then we have some product evaluations, like why we like colostrum so much. We have a deep dive article on that. It allows us to, Instagram is soundbite health.
Yes, absolutely.
It allows us to go deeper. So we would encourage women, they can find that through the link in our Instagram bio.
Okay. We'll put the link in the show notes too, so people can get directly there. That's awesome. Yeah. So you primarily work one-on-one with people, or do you do group programs too?
Yeah, we do a hybrid model actually, because we do think that women in this time of life tend to insulate a little bit and insulate and isolate, right? And they need community. They need to understand that they're not the only one going through it. And sometimes they're the best ones to help group source ideas to get over obstacles, even if that just means a breakfast option that's not eggs, right? Like just coming up with that stuff. So we used to work strictly one-on-one. Then we did a group program, and we realized that there are benefits to both. And as much as women will come to us and say, I don't need the community stuff, I don't want to be part of it, by the time they're done with us, they're actually some of the most active in it. And so what we do is women come in and we give them a really robust education program for about 8 weeks. it's not in a vacuum. They're still meeting with us every 2 weeks as a group on Zoom calls. They're very much like this. It's an open, wide open, ask us anything sort of format.
Nice.
We refer to it as immersion learning because, when we don't do an open and closed thing with our work. So women can join at any given time, but that might be they're with someone who's 4 years into their journey and has been on HRT for a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a very different learning curve for each one, but it tends to create incredible synergy because women start to understand what to expect, or they start to see that someone came out the other side. And so they get this education, they get a ton of community support, they get testing, which we do not send until they're a month in because we want women to have skin in the game. We just had someone today who said, can't I just have a custom program and you just do all this testing? We're like, but what's the testing going to tell you? I mean, we just talked about that, right?
Right.
Shot in time. Great.
Yeah.
So we wait till you're kind of like in the program.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then take your test. And then you get us for like anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes, one-on-one deep dive, comprehensive, and, not to pump our own tires, but we've had women say, I have never received this much information and attention and protocol guidance from anyone ever. And so we give that, and then you're with us for still another 4 months where we're here to support you. Usually you get a referral to an HRT provider if that's what you choose. We match people according to what is it that you're looking for, Christine. If you're only 42 and you just want to even out these periods right now and not be a psychopath on the 15th of the month, we got someone. So we do that. And then women frequently just stay with us. They can kind of up 6 months at a time to just continue in the community and be on phone calls. And, we use same app that you do. And so everyone's got us 24/7 on chat, and, a lot of we're in your back pocket for this journey. So
great. I love that approach. It's very comprehensive. Very cool. Well, thank you again for being here with me today. And everybody, check out the show notes to get direct access to these wonderful women. Kristin and Maria, it was so great. So everyone, I will see you guys, I guess, next season, technically, though we'll be doing some fun stuff throughout the summer. So see you soon. Bye.